Hello, everyone. We're gonna start in a minute or so. If everybody can start taking seats. So thank you, everybody who has come to this second documentary projection from the Human Rights Month. I want to first thank the Academy on Human Rights for putting this together. For today's panel, we have a special projection about one of the most critical humanitarian crises worldwide, which is happening as we speak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So before introducing the panel, I want to basically remind some of the housekeeping remarks that we make every year, every event. The first one is we don't have simultaneous interpretation for this one, so it's going to be entirely in English. The movie has subtitles, but in English, and it will be projected after some introductory remarks. The same rules that we have been applying for other panels apply here. Please do not leave the room until the panel has finished. If you have any garbage, plates, glasses, or anything like that, please take that out as soon as the panel finishes. We want the room to be completely clean. To introduce the panel, I will just say that we're going to be screening the documentary A Silent War, a story of human suffering and resilience in Congo by Voice of America, Africa, aiming to foster a meaningful discussion around one of the world's most severe and complex humanitarian crises. For those of you that are not familiar with the situation, since early 2025, conflict in the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has sharply escalated following an offensive by M23 rebel group, reportedly supported by Rwanda. MT23 group has seized key cities, including Goma and Bukavu, sparking a new wave of violence that has led thousands of deaths and the displacements of over 1.15 million of people in North and South Kivu provinces. Human rights organizations have documented summary execution, including at least 21 civilians killed in Goma in February 2025, as well as a widespread sexual violence, abductions, and attacks on healthcare facilities. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Kaylee Ronquist. I hope I probably pronounced that badly. She's an experienced humanitarian and development professional whose work bridges public health, law, education, and their intersection. As a program officer at JSI, she has coordinated operations for over 10 global humanitarian and supply chain implementation projects across the Middle East and Africa. Her diverse experience includes cultural diplomacy in Tunisia, health policy in the American Midwest, and leading a variety of immigration justice and community engagement programs. With focus on advocacy and neurolinguistic, Kaylee is particularly interested in how language shapes access to rights and resources in humanitarian crises. She has been honored with awards for her community leadership and work advising gender equity. Kaylee is pursuing a master's degree applied in sociolinguistics and in Georgetown University, where she seeks to explore intersection of language, discourse, and humanitarian development nexus. And before that, I just want to thank Symphorian, who is one of our students here in the master's, and he was the brain also behind putting this together. Okay, so thank you, Symphorian. So Kaylee, the floor is yours. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you so much for that introduction and for introducing what we're here to talk about today. And thank you all for being here today. We're very grateful to American for hosting this important program and for creating space for reflection on the human cost of conflict and humanitarian law in the context of the DRC, one of the most protracted and complex humanitarian crises in the world. I'm very honored to have been invited to moderate today's event. I would just like to build on the introduction that Gabriel provided to include information that the DRC is among the most resource-rich countries in the world. It is responsible for about 70% of the global cobalt production, an element essential for lithium-ion batteries. It holds roughly 60% of the world's coltan reserves, critical for electronics like smartphones and computers. Its vast tropical rainforests represent about 10% of the world's total, and it possesses approximately 13% of global hydropower potential, enough to theoretically power most of Africa through the Inga Dam. The country is also a major source of copper, tin, gold, and diamonds. While humanitarian law is intended to protect civilians during times of conflict, what we often see is a persistent failure to respect these laws. And this failure so often is not just about politics or territory, but deeply tied to natural resources. Instead of contributing to peace and prosperity, these resources are at the heart of conflict. Armed groups, corrupt networks, and global corporations exploit mining sites to fund violence. Informal and unregulated extraction exposes workers, including children, to dangerous conditions. Profits from these sectors rarely reach local communities. In many cases, natural resources prolong violence by providing revenue streams that make peace less attractive to those in power or in control of key territories. We're about to screen A Silent War, Stories of Human Suffering and Resilience in Congo, a film presented by Voice of America. Released in 2024, the film brings us firsthand accounts from individuals and communities affected by the ongoing violence in the DRC, as well as clips of speeches from political figures. It is told in English, French, and Kiswahili with English subtitles, and runs approximately 30 minutes. The film focuses on the people who live through conflict every day. It shares voices of community members, healthcare workers, aid providers, and others who are navigating life amid instability and violence. Their stories highlight resilience, but also remind us of the responsibility the international community bears to uphold humanitarian principles and challenge us to think critically about the role of humanitarian law. Humanitarian legal frameworks are not abstract concepts, but they are designed to protect real people in real conflicts every day. Following the screening, we are honored to be joined by two esteemed humanitarians who will explore these issues more deeply. We have Dr. David Crane, who was the founding chief prosecutor of the International War Crimes Tribunal in West Africa, called the United Nations Special Court for Sierra Leone, and Mr. Symphorien Bikobusio, who is a lawyer from Eastern Congo with substantial leadership experience in principled humanitarian aid and the protection of vulnerable populations. Together, they bring years of experience in this field, and their insights will help us connect what we see on screen to broader questions about law, policy, and action. Thank you again to American University for bringing us together for this event. We hope today will not only inform, but also inspire dialogue, learning, and engagement in support of those most affected by war. Thank you, and please enjoy the film.
Toka kwangu Kibumba, mimi nakumbuka mashamba zangu, nakumbuka nyumba yangu, nakumbuka gizi nilikuwa sishinde njala, watoto wangu walikuwa nashinda biko nakula birai, kila kitu kiko kunyumba na msururu hata kosa, lakini leo hii tunashinda maisha ya makuni. Njoo kwa maana mtu anaweza kumbuka vya mingi vya kutoka Kibumba.
Maisha kule nyumbani ilikuwa mzuri juu nilikuwa na atelier yangu ya kushona. Nilikuwa na wanafunzi wenye mimi nafundisha ya kushona, lakini huko juu ya kuacha mashini sina jinsi ya kubakia biesa vile jinsi nilikuwa kule kwetu.
Kile chanzo kulima birai na kumaraka bila shida. Na ukichuruza unapata pesa bila shida lolote.
Ulipenda maisha pale?
Maisha pale ilikuwa mzuri, ni juu vita njina ya haribishi. Mimi maisha ilikuwa mzuri.
Nema ya Congo itafute nguvu yoyote hii mavita za kuleta kila siku nazo ziweze kuisha. Population ilishachoka na mavita. Batusaidie. Ona watoto wanataka kufia munjia. Bazazi banakufia munjia. Hii yote bafanye nguvu yote mavita ziweze kuisha.
Hakuna tena kuuliza tunajua ni nani, na UN kule wanajua ni nani. Tunasubiri sasa sanction, tunasubiri wapatie Rwanda nini na sanction ambayo inamstahili. Ni kujua kwamba adui ni jeshi la Rwanda, ni jeshi la Rwanda ndio ambao inakuja ikijipitisha sawa M23, na sisi tunajua ina ulimwengu yote tayari ilishakubali.
Monsieur le Président, l'implication du Rwanda et sa responsabilité dans la tragédie que vivent mon pays et mes compatriotes des zones occupées par l'armée rwandaise et ses alliés du M23 ne sont plus discutables.
Based on what the government in DRC is talking about, is blaming us, we are supporting M23, and then M23 must go back to where they came from. We even try to explain almost on a regular basis how those people fighting there did not actually come from here.
There are very credible reports of support for armed groups by all sides, including the FDLR, by Congolese forces, and M23 by Rwandans. And our position is clear. Whoever it's by, whoever it's to, that support needs to cease for any armed group.
Any force commander that sit in this chair thinking that it's a military operation, you will not succeed, because it's not. It's not. It's a political, diplomatic, and military operation.
There's been a feeling in Kigali that Rwanda has the right to determine what goes on in Eastern Congo, and it has the right to help itself to the minerals there. It has the right to be a key player strategically, commercially, politically.
Vita imekuwa kama mungazi wa kupeleka watu kufikia madaraka. Ndio maana wamejua kama tukafanya vita tutapata kitu. Ya nne ni kuwa haisaulikani ulimwengu mzima kama nchi hii ni tajiri kwa madini, hasa ili jimbo la Kivu ya Kaskazini. Ni hiyo pia inaleta vita huko.
Iyo urebye kubatanga ibimenyetso ni guverinoma ya Congo, nabahoze ari abasirikare, n'abari muri societe civile bavuga ko barwanya u Rwanda batabica ku ruhande, ni babandi bari mu mitwe ingana muburo iri muri Congo nibo babazwa. Ibyo ngibyo ni byanditse muri iyo raporo.
Le Rwanda, comme nous ne cessons de le dire, travaille avec les M23 ou les créateurs du M23, et le M23 est un mouvement réputé qui commet de massacres.
Mimi nilikuwa nakimbia. Tukaanza sasa kitu na kinapasuka. Tukakimbia tu. Basi kenda sikia hivi hii mishipa hapa na katika. Sasa nikeshindwa sasa kutembea. Ile kulala chini. Ndio nenda angalia sasa hii mwili yote huku yote inatoka. Hii hapa hii iko na selelemba hivi. Nina kamata nilikuwa vala kikwembe, nikikamata nikefunga mie peke. Sasa wale baba waliniona sema hapana, huyu tusimwache hapa, tubaki ni nyangula. Wani nyangula wakinizungusha sasa mpori yote, nisio kanifikisha sasa hospitali ya Bambo. Kama hospitali ya Bambo, basi kuniona waganga waseme hapana, huyu hatutamtunzia hapa, tumutume wapi? Ruchuru. Alosema nikanitia mtu gari, wakinikimbiza sasa hospitali ya Ruchuru. Tukaka mhopitali Ruchuru njo banganga bakule njo na bazungu njo bakenitrete. Kama balinitia dawa kanimesa hizi jua. Hapo njo banayogi balinitunzaka. Sasa nilifanya kule mwezi moja njo bakisema bananja ona umu muko shoke sitaweza fanyanga. Banashona kisha ndani muko kama kachuma mwe banapima metre baketia ndio bakekata saa huku banakaa banafinika sasa.
Sanya ilianzaka ilikuwa usiku saa 8 tukaanza sikia milio masasi na mabombe ziko napiga yulu kwenye basuka balikuwa biko. Kisha tukasikia kule yulu wetu wanaanza kimbia, wanaanza pita bikuwa kimbia. Sasa mimi nilikuwa kana mimba na watoto nikashindwa kimbia mwele usiku. Bwana yeye akasema ngoa mimi nikimbie kwanza juu wanaume anabatafutaka sana. Yeye akatoka mnyumba akakimbia kaniacha na watoto. Sawa ligombana kati bakashuka mumugine. Kufika kwangu juu nilikuwa nuzisha pombe kwangu kulikuwa na jenjua mabashe nje. Bakakata mulango ya kwangu. Wakanikuta niko ndani na watoto. Wakaanza kukamata zile mapombe wakakunywa, wakaninyang'anya pesa yote, nikamata na kingufu. Kasema nikalalamika wataniua. Basi kumbe kweli kunikamata na kingufu. Wakapasula ile fasi ya mikoyo. Najua ile sababu mtoto akakufia mtumbo.
The situation is really concerning in North Kivu in general, a situation in which you have more than 1 million people that have been displaced over the last several months. And this is in a context where already the health system was suffering. Were a lack of nutritional, a lack of therapeutic to provide for children, a lack of resources in the health centers and in the hospitals, and now with all of the displaced people in the area, it's become much worse.
The majority of them have been in this condition for so long that they are very precarious. So most of them start in intensive care. And then as they get stronger and stronger, we move them through the stages of care. And then these are the children that are on their way to recovery. So from here, most of these children have already started to regain appetite so they can feed themselves with our plumpinade. And they're already in much better condition than they arrived. And so once they're stable, then we send them back to the camps, but they will continue outpatient care.
Mtoto alikuwa anatapika na kuhara moto ya mingi. Nikaenda kwa hospitali, kufika kwa hospitali wakanipa dawa. Nikakatala, sasa nikatalaka kufika hapo tena turu ya pili, bakanitumana huku. Wakati wanitumana huku, bakampatia dawa.
Anaendeleaje sasa?
Iko bie.
Wamesema ana tatizo gani? Madaktari wamesema ana ugonjwa gani?
Ana ugonjwa wa kukosewa na chakula.
They've been sick in the camps for who knows how long, and by the time they get here, they're right on the edge, and we try our best to intervene. We give them the best care we can, but sometimes it's just too late for them, and they're so weak that they can't come back. So even just in the week and a bit that we've been open, we've lost some cases.
Presida anatuonesha hii sehemu hapa ndiko waliweza kuanza kuzika watoto. nafasi ambapo tunazika wale ambao wametuacha watoto. Unaangalia hapa hakuna udongo. Hivi siku kunakuwa shida ya kifo, watafika tu wanatosha vile sawa hii na ile kisha wanaweka mwili hapo na kisha wanaongeza wanakamata mawe vile na wanazika.
Safari yangu tuliweza kukuya, tulisikia masasi ya mingi, ni siku ya 4 tukekuya, tukelala munjia mara 3. Tulala munjia mara 3, tulikuwa nalala nje tunalobana na mvula. Tulisumbuka sana, mtoto mmoja kumugongo, wengine kushingo, kukokota mkono, watoto wakivimba miguu kukuya. Kufika hapa nako tukefikia nje, hatuna nyumba, tukikuwa nalala nje, kulala njala nje. Sasa njoo Croix-Rouge iketusaidia, waketuletea himabashe, njoo sasa tulishajenga huko manyumba kwa kuwa na bakiamo hivi. Lakini sasa hizi mwezi zenye tuko humo, pame ilikuwa tusaidia mwezi mmoja, sasa kunaisha tena miezi 2 ni habaya tupokeleshi. Kuna njala sana kabisa.
Jameni, amani ndio kitu cha kwanza. Hata mtupe chakula, hata muwape chakula, kama hakuna amani ni kusema hakuna kitu chochote. Hawa wote mnaowaona hapa walikuwa katika mashamba zao, walikuwa wakizoea kula mboga ya majani, wakila viazi, wakila nini. Kile tunachomuomba Mungu atusaidie kweli tupate amani, hao watu warudi makwao. Wakirudi makwao salama itakuwa. Lakini kama bado wangali hapa, magonjwa yapo, magonjwa ya diarrhea, kolera, kipindupindu, si ndio hiyo? Suluba, watoto wadogo, homa kali, kikohozi. Kwa nini maisha wanayoyaishi ya msongamano?
According to the humanitarian response plan, 26 million people are in need in DRC in 2023. The humanitarian response plan is covering 10 million in 2023. 2022 it was 8.8. The crisis is worsening, so we need attention.
1, 2, 3, c'est parti. Wasikilizaji wapenzi wa Go FM, karibuni kufuata kipindi chenu Haki za Mwanamke. Kipindi Haki za Mwanamke kinapeperushwa kila siku ya kwanza kwenye Go FM, ambao ni radio ya haki za mwanamke. Kwa utangazaji munite Natasha Sikraviti, lakini siko mimi peke ndani ya studio, Pasimu Balama ambaye ni mteteaji wa haki za wanawake.
Na ni kwa hiyo tunaenda sana ndani ya kambi ili kusensibiliser na memba ama communauté juu ya kuona namna gani kuproteger ama kukinga haki za wamama na watoto.
Wewe ndio kibofu. Sasa ni kuhimiza wale wa mama na kuwaonesha namna gani wakati wanakutanana na hizo hali za ujeuri ni sharti wa denoncer, kwa sababu mara mingi wakati mama anajikuta huko ndani ya pori na amepatwa na hiyo tendo, mara mingi wanabaki kimya, hawatasema lolote. Lakini tunawahimiza na kuwaonesha ya kuwa ukibaki kimya, wale ambao wanakuwa wanafaa hivyo hawataadhibiwa. Lakini wakati unadenonse na wakati unajiripoti, anaweza akapata msaada mbalimbali, msaada kimafikiri, anaweza akapata dawa ili kujikinga non seulement contre malali mbalimbali, mais vile vile kupata mimba na hiyo ujeuri kimafikiri.
Kwa tafuta makuni naona mtu anashimama yule yangu, na mimi natumi niko tafuta tu makuni, na niambia sema toka wapi, na mimi niko tafuta tu makuni. Ase chenye niko natafuta kama uchinipatie ndawa mtoto wako. Naambia niko tafuta nini, simbona sina makuta. Ase tafute makuta. Basi niko naona zalaka watoto wazuri, mimi nataka tu unipatie. Naambia lakini unisaidie, unisamee. Ase hapana family. Naambia hapana, tuligombanaka. Akasema kalalamika tu mtoto wako ndamuua. Asema hapana basi niuye mtoto. Tuligombana kanishinda nini nguvu. Paka ataka fa benya dafa kamaliza. Amenga shimama nililiaka saa mrefu. Na ile siku sikubebaka hata makuni. Nilipitaka ngajishimamia ngaenda. Na makuni sikubebaka.
I mean, it's what we saw when we first arrived in this area and we started responding to the urgent needs that we were seeing in the health centers, in the hospitals. We were told that cases of sexual violence had more than doubled, tripled, sometimes quadrupled in some of these centers. So that's hugely concerning. And that's, of course, in a context where maybe not all women are aware that services exist that can help them when it comes to sexual violence.
Sasa nifika kunyumba bwanangu kaniuliza mbona uko sama nyuni kufanya, naambia hapana. Sikutafuta tu makuni, nilifika munjia mfulika kwa mingi, sikutafuta makuni njoo ngashirudilia. Cho vile maisha yaendea kaka. Paka leo nishanyamaza. Leo mimi nabiambia jizi muone magumu tu kwa maisha amba. Na nyewe peke mnapafika. Tuambie kama tutaishi haya.
Government ya Congo imeshindwa kupatia wakaaji ukingo, na hiyo ni mambo ambayo mimi mwenyewe kibinafsi sielewi.
In this country, the security situation suffer like a degradation. MONUSCO is one of the biggest and one of the most important peace operations in the world. MONUSCO are here for more than 20 years.
MONUSCO iko komplisi ya vita yote yenye iko natendeka mu jamhuri yetu ya demokrasia ya Kongo.
Population inasirika, miaka 22 ya mauaji ni mingi, na ndio mission ya kwanza ulimwenguni. Kwa leo raia wanasema MONUSCO iende, tumechoka na mauaji.
Watu pia walikuwa wakijiuliza toka zamani, MONUSCO ina kazi gani? Wanaua watu karibuni hata pembezoni mwa kempi za MONUSCO. Na sasa watu wanajiuliza, hao watu wana kazi gani?
La MONUSCO est devenue pour nous un problème de sécurité. Là où elle devait être la solution, elle devient le problème. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, nous devons nous organiser sur chaque site de la MONUSCO d'avoir des policiers, sur chaque véhicule qui roule. Mais tout ça, ça nous pose un problème. Lorsque vous avez le secrétaire général des Nations Unies lui-même, Antonio Guterres, dire qu'ils ne sont pas en mesure de combattre les M23, qui est considéré comme la principale source de l'insécurité dans cette partie du pays, il y a un problème.
MONUSCO iti 80% by'intwaro M23 ikoresha baba bazambuye FARDC 80%. Noneho ugasanga abandi nabo mu muryango w'abibumbye icyo kintu ntacyo bakivuzeho, batariko intwaro zazende ebyiri berekanye n'izindi nibiva mu Rwanda.
How we can still contribute for the stabilization and for the peace here in the Eastern DRC. And how is possible a massive presence of troops here in this country and people are still dying? Because for some of them, the main task of MONUSCO is to engage the armed groups, but it's not true. The mandate is to provide protection for the civilians.
On a besoin d'une mission plus efficiente, plus proactive, qui puisse être en mesure de gérer les problèmes de sécurité qui sont bien connus. Et donc à partir de 2023, on va commencer les processus de retrait. Ça fait quand même 23 ans qu'ils sont là. Et quand les résultats ne viennent pas, ça ne sert à rien de se cramponner sur une mission dont on sait qu'il ne pourra pas atteindre les résultats dans la forme actuelle.
Sisi hatuko tatizo ni serikali ya Kongo ambao hapendi amani. Tuliwaomba wafungule njia ya barabara saa ya RNB, hii njia ya pili ya nchi yetu ya Kongo, wamekataa. Tunasema yote tuzungumuze, wamekataa. Tunasema wale wa refugee yote wakimbizi warudi kwa makao wao, hao wamekataa. Wanaleta maneno mzozo, waleta maneno ya vurugo ndani ya wale watu ili wasirudi na maeneo yao. Shida ni serikali ya Kongo ambao hapendi amani, lakini kwa sisi tunapenda amani. Tunasema watu wote warudie kwao, watumike vizuri sana, watembee kisi waliopenda, lakini government ya Kongo anakataa hiyo maneno yote, anafunga barabara, anafunga boda, anafunga vitu yote. Shida sio sisi, shida ni government ya Kongo bwana.
Na vita ambavyo unaviona hapa vinakuwa na vyanzo vinne. Ya kwanza, kuna wale wanatafuta kwa nguvu uraia wa Kongomani. Ya pili, kuna wale ambao wanatafuta ardhi, nafasi ya kuishi, nafasi ya kufanya mlimo, nafasi ya kufanya mafugo ya ng'ombe na vingine. Ya tatu, kuna wale wanatafuta madaraka na wanatumia nguvu, wanaua watu. Vita imekuwa kama mungazi wa kupeleka watu kufikia madaraka. Ndio maana wamejua kama tukafanya vita tutapata kitu. Ya nne ni kuwa haisaulikani ulimwengu mzima kama nchi hii ni tajiri kwa madini, hasa ili jimbo la Kivu ya Kaskazini. Ni hiyo pia inaleta vita huko. Kila mtu yeyote anapenda pale popote yupo afike naye aweke mkono kwenye maeneo ambayo yanakuwa na madini ili aanze kuwa pia ajifadhilie apate pesa.
The reason that there has been this M23 problem suddenly rising up seemingly out of nowhere after 10 years of quiet on that front is because what Kagame saw was he saw Felix Tshisekedi reaching out over his head and becoming a player in East Africa without going through him. And that meant that Felix Tshisekedi, DRC was welcomed into the East African community. And I really think that that is why you see suddenly this M23 becoming a really big player in the scene, because it is effectively Paul Kagame telling Congo, but also telling the rest of Central Africa and the rest of the world, you cannot ignore me, you cannot sideswipe me, I have to be part of any deal you do, and if you don't include me, I will make trouble.
uraza kuvuga uti n'u Rwanda. Ikindi kigaragara yuko ari n'urwitwazo cyangwa se ari iturufu. Ushaka kuguma ku butegetsi arahonda ku Rwanda, ushaka gufata ubutegetsi nawe binyuze mu matora nawe arahonda ku Rwanda. Kubera iki? U Rwanda rwabaye iturufu. Ariko nibyo nkubwira, niyo warugira iturufu ntago bihindura ibibera hariya kuri tere. Ari nayo mpamvu iki kibazo gihora kizunguruka ntaho biva ntaho bijya.
Well, the obvious solution is some form of sanctioning. And what we've seen are just recently, we've seen some sort of rather watered down attempts at sanctioning. So the EU in July issued a list of 7 men that it wanted to sanction. Some of these men were in the armed militia groups inside Eastern Congo. Some of them were part of the M23. And I don't have any doubt that these men are responsible for the bloodletting and the rape and the massive turbulence that we're seeing in Eastern Congo. But the point is, why remain at such a low level? We know that the chain of command goes a lot further up. And the people paying the price, of course, for that are the Congolese. So we see that there are over 1 million people displaced since March 2022. So they're paying a very, very high price.
icyo navuga ni uko batagifatiye igihugu cy'u Rwanda, bagifatiye umuntu ku giti cye. U Rwanda rubitanga ibisobanuro, hari ibyo rwatanze muri uko bakoze raporo ngaragaje bitaritayeho, nta n'ikibuza ko u Rwanda rushobora gutanga ibisobanuro kuri uwo musirikare warwo, noneho kuri Leta Zunze Ubumwe za Amerika yafashe ibyo bihano. Ntabwo umubano wacitse, ntabwo umubano wajemo igitotsi, umubano ni mwiza, ibihugu byombi biravugana.
Gouvernement ya Congo inapashwa kufanya yote ili wapate solution. Mimi sijui kama watafanya manegociation na Rwanda na M23, kwani gouvernement ilikatala, inasema itafanya negotiation. Lakini nafikiri kwa nini tukatae na watu waendelee kuuawa?
Ce n'est pas ça que les Congolais méritent de vivre dans leur propre pays. Et donc, la solution, c'est d'obtenir que ces Congolais puissent rentrer chez eux. C'est pour ça que justement nous faisons des pressions pour qu'à travers la diplomatie, nous puissions obtenir les résultats, que ces Congolais rentrent chez eux.
U Rwanda rero rwemera yuko nta yindi nzira ishobora gukemura ibibazo ibyo ari byo byose hagati y'ibihugu bituranye uretse inzira y'amahoro, inzira y'ibiganiro, kandi rwiteguye kuyijyamo.
I would now like to introduce our panelists who will be guiding us through a discussion on the film we just watched, starting with Dr. Crane. So Dr. Crane was the founding chief prosecutor of the International War Crimes Tribunal in West Africa, as I previously mentioned, called the United Nations Special Court for Sierra Leone. The world's first hybrid international war crimes tribunal, the Special Court for Sierra Leone successfully prosecuted those who bore the greatest responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity, to include the first sitting African head of state in history, President Charles Taylor. He recently published a book on his experience called Every Living Thing, the first time an international chief prosecutor has written about his daily experiences seeking justice for victims of atrocity. Dr. Crane served 30 years in the US federal government prior to his selection by Kofi Annan to be the chief prosecutor of the Special Court, the first American since Justice Robert H. Jackson. A member of the Senior Executive Service of the United States, he retired from the federal service as the director of the Office of Intelligence Review in the Department of Defense, where he oversaw on behalf of the Secretary of Defense and the intelligence committees of the US Congress 80% of the US intelligence community organizations. Since leaving West Africa, Dr. Crane has been leading a force in seeking justice for the people of Syria through the Syrian Accountability Project and assisting in the creation of the international, impartial, and independent mechanism for the Republic of Syria. The Syrian Accountability Project is part of the Global Accountability Network, which he founded, that also houses the Yemeni Accountability Project and the Venezuelan Accountability Project, as well as the Uyghur and Ukrainian Accountability Projects. And there's more. Dr. Crane is assisting the international community in the creation of a special tribunal for Ukraine on the crime of aggression. For these efforts, President Vladimir Putin has placed sanctions on him and banned him from travel to the Russian Federation. He is one of 25 persons that Putin has personally sanctioned as an enemy of the state. In 2014, Dr. Crane was the co-author of the world-famous Caesar Report, which captured for the first time direct evidence of crimes against humanity being committed by President Assad of Syria against his own citizens. Dr. Crane is a veteran, having served his country as an officer in the 101st Airborne Division during the Vietnam era and the 82nd Airborne Division, as well as a Special Operations Officer in the United States Army. His highest awards include the Master Parachute Badge and the Legion of Merit. He holds various undergraduate, graduate, and professional degrees from Ohio University, Syracuse University, and Case Western University. He recently retired as a professor at Syracuse University College of Law, where he founded Impunity Watch. Dr. Crane currently is a distinguished scholar in residence at Syracuse University and an adjunct professor at the Washington College of Law of American University, where he teaches international criminal practice. They are very lucky to have him. Okay, and next I will introduce our second panelist. We have Mr. Samforian Bikubusio, who is a lawyer and university assistant at UML with substantial leadership experience in principled humanitarian aid and the protection of vulnerable populations. He is recognized for his commitment to the ethical distribution of aid, prioritizing the rights of those affected. With expertise in humanitarian principles and international law, he advises public and private sector entities. As a former member of the Strategic Advisory Group of the Global Protection Cluster, representing local and national organizations, he contributed to strategic discussions and policy development. Furthermore, Mr. Symphorian frequently leads training on humanitarian standards, sustainable development, accountability, and compliant handling. His work focuses on strengthening accountability within the humanitarian sector. As a corporate lawyer, he advises companies on legal and administrative matters, ensuring ethical and regulatory compliance. His expertise in domestic and international outsourcing and recruitment helps organizations build effective teams. His commitment to training has earned him 2 honorary doctorates for his contributions to the humanitarian field. Mr. Symphorian is also the founder and coordinator of the Centre de Recherche Jurisconsult, or the CRJ, which supports local and national actors through training, resources, and expertise for community rights-based local development in sub-Saharan Africa. CRJ aims to promote inclusive humanitarian protection and effective sustainable development by assisting affected populations and supporting institutions in integrating humanitarian principles and human rights into their policies. CRJ focus areas include protection from sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, combating statelessness and gender-based violence, and adhering to humanitarian standards and coordination. Right, so we can dive into our questions. I will start with Dr. Crane over here. So Dr. Crane, based on the documentary we have just watched, what specific provisions within human rights law do you consider to be particularly applicable to the situation depicted?
Is this on? No, it's not. All right. All right, testing. Can you hear me? All right. Well, my goodness gracious. The Congo is a horror story that's been around, frankly, for over 100 years. It never was right. King Leopold II of Belgium started the horror story back in the late 19th century, and it has been not right ever since, in my opinion. And as you can see there, it's certainly problematic at so many levels. The dirty little wars of the 21st century, which is what I call, women and children pay the brutal price for these wars. They are essentially the victims related to any of these places around the world, which obviously you are aware that I've been very much involved in a lot of them. And interesting enough, though, I've not really been involved in the Congo, and the reason why is because nobody cares, nobody thinks about it, and nobody's doing much about it, to include the United Nations, which is frankly a joke. And it's been around, and as you can see, it's withdrawing because it's not been able to do much of anything. But to specifically answer the question is that, we have this regime of international humanitarian law, and within that, the laws of armed conflict, which apply to both international as well as non-international armed conflict. In other words, the warring parties, whatever they may be, whether it be rebel or professional armies, have to follow these rules, and if they don't, they're committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we certainly are seeing that play out in the movie and elsewhere. one of the basic principles of the laws of armed conflict is that women and children are especially to be protected. It says in Geneva 4 of the civilian portion of that they are especially to be protected. And the fundamental rule is civilians can never be intentionally targeted. And yet, as you see there, we do have civilians specifically being targeted. And so what's going on is that Congo, as well as Rwanda, the rebels involved in this, and they're more than just what was depicted here, they're all committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so that is the basic standard by which we evaluate conflict. But as I said, in the 21st century, the dirty little wars, a lot of parties to conflicts are in fact not following the laws of armed conflict, which is a tragedy. And we're also seeing that play out in the Russian invasion, as well as what's going on in Gaza. But it's really important for us to know that, the international community came together and said that the state of mankind is warfare. John Keegan, the famous British historian, said the history of mankind is the history of war, and the history of war is the history of mankind. And in the 4,000 plus years of, quote, civilization, so to speak, only 365 years have been non-conflicted. And so that is the state. But the international community has come together and laid out rules related to, if there is an armed conflict, whatever it may be, you have to follow these rules or you will be sanctioned for not following those rules. So that's this general regime related to what's going on in the Congo and elsewhere.
Thank you for that. Perhaps we could use a bit more context now, so I'll turn it over to Symphorian. Once the microphone works, I'll start with the question. So, Mr. Symphorian, could you provide an overview of the current humanitarian situation as it stands in the Congo?
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. After viewing this documentary, what may I add? In fact, although the Democratic Republic of the Congo is endowed with a vast natural resource, it remains one of the world's most fragile humanitarian crises, as we have just watched. Because this documentary was made, I think that almost 2 years ago, and as of the mid of this year, the country is experiencing one of the most acute and multi-faceted humanitarian crises globally. Millions of Congolese continue to suffer from the consequences of armed conflict, displacement, poverty, and systemic underdevelopment. Currently, as we saw, it's only estimated figures, over 7 million people are internally displaced. Many of whom have fled homes multiple times due to ongoing violence perpetrated by armed groups, particularly in the eastern provinces, as we have just watched. An estimated 21 million people are in an urgent need of humanitarian assistance, compensing food, shelter, medical care, education, and protection services. However, humanitarian efforts are severely hindered by several factors, such as persistent insecurity, looting and obstruction, lack of access because in most places we don't have roads, and underfunding of critical humanitarian interventions. The 2025 United Nations Humanitarian Response Plan has appealed for $2.54 billion to adequately meet the most pressing needs across the country. However, as of the latest report, funding remains significantly below the the target. So in short, I can say that the situation is worse. But it's happy to say because we can't only explain and give the dark side of the situation. And Congolese people are happy, and young people are entrepreneurs, and they are involved in many, many activities. And you can see the value of family, and also the food in Africa in general and in Congo in particular is organic, tasty. So there is also another good side of life.
Thank you so much for humanizing the people there for us and providing some really important figures. That really helps to contextualize what we just watched. Going back to Dr. Crane now, I'm wondering, in the context of the armed conflict shown in the documentary, what provisions of international humanitarian law do you see are most prevalent?
Well, as I kind of generally outlined in my initial remarks, we do have massive violations of international law and also international humanitarian law. I want to pause here and state, and some of my students have already heard me say this, but international humanitarian law, as well as international criminal law, is a creature of politics. It takes political will to do something. And as you see here, there's not a lot of political will. And frankly, there hasn't been a lot of political will in the Congo. Most Americans have no idea where the Congo is. In fact, frankly, many of them are not really sure where Africa is. In fact, I remember giving a talk somewhere in North America when I was chief prosecutor, and someone asked me the question is, what's the capital of Africa? And so that kind of, I'm usually not at a loss for words, but I don't want to demean people, but that kind of tells you the view of many citizens around the world, particularly in North America, particularly in the United States, is that most people don't even know where the Congo is. It's not saying that they wouldn't care if they saw something like this, but the bottom line is they don't, not even aware that Congo exists, and they're not even aware of the challenge. And this is where the politics comes in, is that there isn't a great deal of concern for these unfortunate displaced human beings that need assistance. And because of that, there is going to be very little assistance to that part of the region of that really actually beautiful country. I've not been there, but people who have said that it is an extraordinary country, geologically, geographically, what have you. Did you know that there are portions of the Congo that have never been explored? That it's like very much like pieces of Amazon, but there are places where no human being has ever set foot. And I remember 10 years ago, they found, the Rwandan gorilla. They found a group of those gorillas, over 100,000 gorillas in the Congo that have been living untouched and harassed by humans forever. And it just shows you the complexity of that, because it is, in some ways, almost an ungovernable space. But again, we have this regime. We have the general rule that we have to treat children and women, especially during armed conflict. But we also have crimes against humanity, a widespread or systematic attack on civilians. Who is doing that? I really don't know. And you probably saw from the movie, everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. The answer is it doesn't matter to that young woman or those women that you saw and children in that huge camp, because it doesn't matter. All they want to do is go home. And so we have violations of pretty much all of the human rights, treaties, protocols, what have you. You name it, they're violating it. But yet, this is a good example of they know about the politics of what's going on there in Goma and in Eastern Congo, they know they will not be held accountable. So they have no really concerns, frankly, that the international community or regionally under the African Union are really going to come in and put a stop to this. I don't see that happening, frankly. I think that this will go on ad infinitum because there is no political reason to stop it. There's no political pressure to stop it. Yeah, there are sanctions, but they come and go and they learn to live with or without the sanctions. I don't mean to be showing a bleak picture, but we have to live in the real world. And so even though we can talk about violations of law all day, and I can give a complete lecture for the rest of the afternoon about the specifics about the violations of international humanitarian law, it's just that in reality, the rule of the gun is more powerful than the rule of law in that part of the world, even though I strongly believe in the rule of the law is more powerful than the rule of the gun. And I've used it many times against some very bad people. But in this particular part of the world, and I'm befuddled. I mean, I've been in difficult parts of the world all my life. I just don't understand that part of the world because it's just not going away. It is an open sore to humanity that will never heal. I don't see it happening in my lifetime, though. You're probably saying, like, he's an old man, so that isn't going to be very, very long. But the point is that in our lifetimes, I don't see a logical solution to the problem, regardless of the violations of the law, because the international community politically is not going to do anything about the challenges. So it's up to the amazing group of NGOs that have been there forever. My entire lifetime, they've been there trying to seek some kind of relief for them, but it's now becoming almost insurmountable. And I really want to stress this. There are parts of the world that we do something about, and eventually these conflicts just kind of peter out, burn themselves out, or the political situation change. In the Congo, it's not happening. And I don't actually have an answer as to why or why not and what's going to happen next. It is just there. And that's a very unusual political circumstance because, again, there is no interest in the international community really truly to solve it. And so it just intuits that it's a forgotten part of the world that is just trying to survive on a day-to-day basis. So I haven't really answered your question only because there is the law, but the law isn't working and it won't work amazingly in this part of the world, regardless of how it goes. It could go well, or it could go incredibly worse, which I agree. Actually, surprisingly, I didn't think it would get any worse than 2023 or 1955 or 1962 or 1977 or what have you, but it continues to actually slide down. And at the end of the day, it boils down to those damn minerals. And that's what they really want. That's what's driving the train. There are corporations behind the scenes that are actually allowing this to happen. As long as there is a lot of disruption, they can slip in, grab things without being burdened by laws of, commercial laws, what have you. So again, there are many, many players involved in this. They kind of introduce some of it, but they're much more than that. And watch out for the multinational corporations. They're up to this to their elbows in extracting these amazing minerals. I mean, it is truly an amazing place. And if it was done correctly, it would transform the world, but it's not. It's being smuggled out at huge profits with a lot of commercial interests going on behind the scenes, very much like what we saw in Sierra Leone with the diamond industry in Sierra Leone, where the alluvial diamonds, what have you, they were also very much players behind the scenes, but that's another story.
You may not have answered the question directly, but you provided some really important context on the humanitarian law side. And I'd like to use that as a segue, speaking of the pointing fingers, over to Mr. Symphorian to talk about if the film touched on this quite a bit, talking about Kigali and Rwanda. but if you could talk a bit more about the perspectives of the Congolese people towards Rwanda and Uganda amid the current conflict.
When we talk about humanitarian, we see the word human. And when we talk about human, we see love. As a humanitarian actor bound by principle of neutrality and impartiality, it is essential to avoid the generalizations and to focus on perspective that foster understanding and cooperation. From this natural and principle standpoint, it is important to highlight that Congolese citizens as a population do not exhibit generalized hostility towards the people of Rwanda and Uganda. On the contrary, thousands of Congolese live peacefully in these neighboring countries, and many have sought refuge there over the years due to insecurity at home. These communities have built Congolese neighborhoods, established schools, and integrated into a broader social fabrics in both Rwanda and Uganda. As far as I'm concerned, a couple of times I've been in Uganda and in Rwanda. There is no problem between the population. So what this illustrates is that at the grassroots level, populations are not inherently at odds. The major grievance and tensions often originate from political dynamics, not from everyday relationship within or between ordinary people. In fact, there is a shared longing across the region for peace, stability, and mutual development. This common desire is a powerful foundation for fostering future regional cooperation and reconciliation.
Thank you for that. It's really well said and very beautiful. Now going back to Dr. Crane, I'd like to return to some of your comments where you were drawing connections between Congo and your work in Sierra Leone. And I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that.
The African people are amazing, and their cultures, multiple languages, multiple histories, are largely misunderstood by the West. The only thing that the West looks at on Africa is that the colonial past, where the European powers of France, Portugal, England, and France basically raped that continent for centuries before finally, during the Cold War, they were, because of these empires had failed or had fallen during World War II, they were forced to give up their colonies and give them independence. I say this in the context that Africans don't kill Africans just because they like to kill Africans. That's not the way. It is, they're a peaceful, important, strong people. So having lived in Africa intensely for many years, I came to respect and to admire Africans in general, and in the regions. They're each and every one of them are different and wonderful to be with. And the resilience, as you can even see in the movie, is amazing. How people can exactly get up every day and move on with life gives all of us hope and respect for what they can do to try to get back to a normal life. And that's very much like what's happening in West Africa as well. You know, the challenges of West Africa, particularly, they were French and British colonies throughout. Sierra Leone was a British colony, and also very much rich in a mineral called diamonds, which is a very interesting mineral to understand. You know, diamonds are actually a common mineral, except that they are gathered by a small group of individuals and kept the demand high and the supply low. And there are over 4 billion diamonds $4 billion worth of diamonds held in London, and they are parceled out, and so that the price remains high. But from a geology point of view, diamonds are just a common mineral, but we have grabbed them and parceled them out. And that draws a lot of interest related to, in fact, people coming in and exploiting that. And that's, I alluded to that. And one of the points I want to make is Africa needs to be allowed to develop on its own with appropriate lawful commercialization and commercial products going out throughout the world. Exploiting Africa because it's Africa is a terrible history, and one which is still very much a problem today, very much so in West Africa, as well as throughout the continent. The biggest challenge to the democracies within Africa is corruption. And it is a terrible cancer which fades the concept of belief in government and belief in freedom and democracy. And because of that, that causes instability, which is bad for commercial progress in and of itself. That was a problem that we had in Sierra Leone, and that's a problem in other parts of Africa as well. But I wanted to just underscore that Africa it's a bad rap. And I think that that's really, really critical for us to understand. Africans are like all of us. They just want to live normally, be free, enjoy their families, and that's how they approach life, just like the rest of us. Yet we still have these many, many challenges related to commercialization of the continent itself. It's still the minerals. It's still a problem. It's been exploited for centuries, and it will continue to be exploited. And because of that, they'll continue to have unrest. But I do want to, having been there many times and have lived among the African people, particularly in West Africa, they don't deserve this, but it's a fact. And so what we need to do is kind of rethink as we move through the 21st century as to how we make Africa as a continent and as a peoples a better place, and not to try to exploit those wonderful people of many nations, many languages, and many cultures. Got a little bit on my high horse here, but it's just deeply disturbs me that it still hasn't changed, even though as we moved into the 21st century, that Africa still is not a backwater, but one that is still considered second rate. And in reality, it has incredible potential if we allow it to evolve in a way that is appropriately, culturally appropriate, socially appropriate under law. Sorry for getting on my high horse.
I don't think anyone here minds. Turning back to Mr. Symphorian. So in the film, we saw a lot of demonstrations of MSF, and Dr. Crane pointed to the failure of the UN. I'm wondering from your perspective, if you could go into more detail about how the humanitarian structure is generally structured and organized to address local needs on the grounds.
Yeah, thank you for this pertinent question, Ms. Kelly. The humanitarian sector in Congo operates under the coordination of the United Nations Office Coordination Humanitarian Affairs, called OCHA. And the system has different clusters. We have cluster protection, and within the cluster protection, we have child protection, GBV, gender-based violence, mine action, and so on. We have also health cluster, nutrition, water, sanitation, and shelter, non-food items, education. And a notable component is the protection cluster, which was established in 2006 to address critical human rights and safety concerns. And this cluster operates several sub-clusters. As I mentioned, within GBV, we have in Kinshasa, even especially in the eastern part of Congo, many sub-clusters. And we have UN agencies, international organizations, national organizations, and also local organizations. So they work together in order to address the GBV issues. We have also child protection, as we viewed in the documentary, mining, when we talk about mine action, and we have also housing. But despite this comprehensive framework, we still have challenges, difficulties. First one I can mention, insecurity restricts access to affected populations. It's very, very difficult to reach all and remote populations. Another thing is funding deficits, especially as all of us, we know about the funding cut. And also we have logistics barriers that complicate transportations of aid to remote access. Nevertheless, there is a growing recognition of the importance of localization. Recently, even at the global level, we are talking about a nexus localization in order to empower local organizations, because they are the first to be in the conflict area and they are the last to remain there. And in Congo, we have a well-organized local and national organization, humanitarian organizations. For instance, in the region of Kinshasa, there is a network. In the region of Kasai, there is a network. And also in the region of Goma and Bukavu. Can we imagine, as we said, and the professor has clearly explained, Congo has been facing a crisis for almost 3 decades. So I have some humanitarian colleagues who were born during the war, raised in the war, and started working as humanitarian during the wars. They don't know anything unless except war. So it's a complicated situation, but thanks to this organization, humanitarian network, it's easy to communicate, to share information.
I think you said a key part there, which is that the network is spanning the borders. It's partnering with organizations in Rwanda and Uganda, which really connects to what you were saying in your last question. We're running low on time, so I will ask Dr. Crane, based on everything discussed so far, do you have any last comments or things you've been pondering that you would like to share with us?
Well, again, just thank you for allowing me to kind of vent a little bit. But at the end of the day, whether it be West Africa, or whether it be Central Africa, or South or East Africa, this is for and about victims. And we tend to step over them. We tend to ignore them. But at the end of the day, it's the victims that we do something about. In some cases, the international community politically decided to create an international tribunal. And so the people of West Africa got justice. But the international community has decided not to do anything about the Congo. And so the people, the victims of this horror story that's decades in the making, will never actually see justice. But I think it would be very, very important. Victims want to tell their stories. If they can at least do that, that is important for them. If they talk about their lost families, villages, family, or friends, and what have you. But to give them an ability to tell the world what has taken place, whether it be in Freetown or in Kabbalah in northern Sierra Leone or in Liberia or what have you, or in Goma or in any part of the eastern portion of the Congo, that's very important as well. So again, this is for and about the victims, but unfortunately, the international community is too distracted to do anything other than to do nothing, actually, other than through what is largely becoming an ineffective United Nations. I just don't see a pathway for peace to the victims of this horror story. But to contrast this is if the international community does decide to do something, such as in West Africa, good things do happen, and the rule of law actually counterbalances the horror stories of the atrocity perpetrators. And it would be wonderful if we had some type of justice mechanism that would be there to show the victims that their lives matter and that they will not disappear in the sands of time without any kind of recognition of their horror. And so there is the huge contrast, but a good example of when the international community decides to do something, good things can happen, whereas in the Congo, the international community has just been too distracted to do anything over time. And I'm afraid that this will continue in an unaccounted way. And it's a tragedy, but it's just a fact of life.
Thank you very much. Mr. Symphorian, any last insights that you would like to share with the group? And I'm also hoping you could go into some detail about the specific work that your organization, the CRJ, is doing in the humanitarian context in Congo.
Thank you. Our organization, Centre de Recherche Jurisconsulte, has been working in a network, humanitarian, and 2 years ago, we represented all national and local organization, humanitarian, at the Global Protection Cluster. And 4 years ago, we started translating the Sphere Handbook. It's a book of more than 500 pages into 4 national languages: Lingala, Swahili, Kikongo, and Chiluba. And it was with our own funding, and we didn't receive external funding. And also we have been involved in capacity building. We organized training in Congo and in other countries, training on GBV, gender-based violence. And recently, many humanitarian actors, even UN employees, were involved in sexual exploitation. So I'm an international trainer on protection from sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. And also, we are the focal point of Sphere. Sphere and Core Humanitarian Standards are organizations that try to disseminate humanitarian standards in the field, accountability, and other standards, how to support really affected populations. And finally, we support local organizations because to operate, you have to have a legal entity. So we try to help to train local organizations how to have a legal entity in DRC. And recently, we tried to create the same Centre de Recherche Jurisconsulte in a couple of countries. In United States, our organization is in DC and in Virginia. So we try only to learn from others and to share our experience.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do not have time to take any questions. However, I'm sure both speakers are happy to take questions. You can find me after this and I can share Mr. Symphorian's research, and I'm sure Dr. Crane you can find through the university as well. So I would like to thank both Dr. Crane and Mr. Symphorian for their expertise and for grounding today's discussion in both local realities and the broader picture in international humanitarian and criminal law. I personally very much enjoyed having both perspectives, and I hope everyone here did too. We covered a lot of ground, talking about the failure of the UN, the shared longing of various populations involved in this conflict, the localizing humanitarian sector, and the work that you both are doing across Congo and beyond. So I would just like to end by saying that, as Mr. Symphorian pointed to, the Congo is a country of immense beauty, rich natural resources, and vibrant cultural heritage. And its people are resilient, creative, and full of hope, with a deep desire for peace, stability, and opportunity. Communities across the DRC and beyond are continuing to work toward a brighter future, driven by their spirit of solidarity and vision for a better future. And I want to thank American once again for hosting this conversation and for continuing to serve as a convener of dialogue. And thank you to everyone for showing up with your commitment and care today and beyond this room. So thank you all and take care.